Welcome to another OCD recovery YouTube video. I thought I would come on here and just talk a little bit about OCD in general. I often come on here and think I've got to have a topic so that I've got a title for the video, but I often find that the times that I do sort of what I think are my best videos is when I just talk broadly so that I cover various different points instead of being so specific to a topic. So I want to talk a little bit about physical anxiety, because I know with the topic of OCD, people think that, most people have got something they're scared of, very scared of, and they've got chronic guilt, chronic shame, chronic anxiety latched on, and the intrusive thoughts, and terrified of that thing, feels life and death, and their complete focus is on that. But that can also come along with physical anxiety, physical symptoms. And the symptoms can then become more of a problem than the thoughts when they are quite sort of distressing symptoms. One, if you've got health OCD, then you become scared of those. But I'm not talking about it in the context of health OCD. I'm just talking about the discomfort that comes along with them. So in my journey, when I look back at my journey, and I've worked with thousands of people with OCD and anxiety over the years, and when I sort of naturally, as any human does, compare their situation, not from an obsessive point of view, but just from a general knowledge perspective, I think my sort of genetic makeup for physical anxiety, certainly in the 1 to 10% of the sort of worst physical anxiety of people that I see with. And so that brings me on to this topic of physical anxiety and how that's a problem and how disabling that can be. So with myself, I had sort of chronic palpitations for years, where if I took my heartbeat at any one point, it would be constantly either light or like a machine gun. And then but the early days, I'd be like, oh my God, I've got atrial fibrillation, get into a hospital, get into a doctor. But at the time, I didn't understand how much anxiety can hijack all these responses that go on in the body that we're unaware of, until anxiety jacks it up and then makes us aware of it. And so I used to have these sort of chronic palpitations, sort of skip beats, really sudden thuds out of nowhere, just walking down the street, and then boom, and think, what the fuck was that? Am I having a heart attack or something? And then I got used to them. And they were difficult. I remember I used to swim a lot, and I'd be in the pool having palpitations all the time, especially when I was gasping for air because I had shortness of breath plus palpitations. And I remember then getting in the sauna in the steam room at times and just thinking, this is fucking terrible. How has my anxiety got this state? Other people are talking about intrusive thoughts, but it's like physical illness. And that's what it felt like for a very long time. I was having nightmares chronically, where I barely remember nights where I wasn't having nightmares. Nightmares was just my life. That was just how I slept. Waking up intermittently all the time, sometimes once or twice a night, sometimes 10 times a night, sometimes drenched in sweat, sometimes waking up suddenly with palpitations, waking up with shortness of breath, all kinds of symptoms, which were made more difficult by the stomach problems I had genetically through GERD. I had an LPR, which was like a sort of where it feels like you have extra. Feels like you have extra mucus in your throat, so that feels blocked and constricted. But then also it feels like you're breathing through a straw or just through a film, because what it basically feels like is like a layer of. It's quite horrible how when you describe it, it's quite a disgusting sort of way to describe it, but you have to for the understanding of it. But it's like breathing through a film of like phlegm, which is built up on acid. So you have acid from the stomach that comes up as vapor, that comes up into the throat, and then that gets activated. Now, the current research on that, not to go off too far off topic, is that it's some sort of built up by pepsin in the esophagus. But all kinds of diet changes didn't make a huge difference, and I still genetically have LPR, but it's not bad now. I don't like it. It can flare up if I drink a lot of wine, a lot of Coca-Cola, and sort of spicy foods. Then I can really experience it. But that was really bad with anxiety. It was so bad. I remember I was going to one boxing fight. I travelled abroad. I was watching a fight take my dad with me, and I remember it was just so bad. I was sitting there, and it was an amazing fight, and I was just had this LPR, acid reflux as well. The whole thing, I had the reflux was so bad that like I was then paranoid that I was going to get a pneumonia from everything that was coming up into my throat when I was sleeping. So it was just a horrible experience, and that went on for a long time. And I was in that hospital having endoscopy to check. Then I was on protein pump inhibitors for about 7 years, omeprazole, esomeprazole, those kind of things, Nexium, and that then cleared it all up. Then I changed my diet, got rid of all fizzy drinks, cut out all that kind of stuff, and then it improved a lot. But then the LPR came later, and that sort of just cut through everything, because it was based on a sort of a vapor, so that even though you had the protein pump inhibitor that was stopping the acid in the stomach, that you still got it come off the stomach, or however it's coming off in the esophagus. And so that was then very frustrating, because I felt like a very rare case that I was never going to get better. I was really sort of very frustrated. Plus I thought it would give me esophageal cancer, so I was very worried about that. Plus I smoked from time to time during all that period, so I was worried I was definitely going to get cancer. So I wasn't very happy about those things, naturally, and I have to think about all these and remember them now. It's like when I'm looking off to the side here, I'm trying to think in your mind. We do those kind of bodily responses where we sort of look somewhere to think, and it's probably I can look right here to think, but it's just a habit. And when I was going through that, I thought that was very difficult. The point it got to was I was in a cafe. I was in London, in northwest London, in Harrow Road, and I was eating in a English breakfast diner, and I was just sitting there having an English breakfast, and I started choking on the bacon, and basically what happened is the food went down, it got lodged right here because the esophagus was swollen. I had esophagitis, so it was swollen. So then I started choking, but I knew all the people in that cafe, and so they were like, you're right, Robert. And I was like, I've just got to go outside for a second, because people walk away when they're choking. But I could still feel air, so I knew I wasn't like going to die from breathing, but it just stuck, it just wouldn't move. And then I had that happen a few other times, and I was reading a lot of books at times, sort of Claire Weeks type books about anxiety. I was like, it's just anxiety, you're imagining it. But I actually had a physical problem at this point. So I was like, no, it's just anxiety, don't worry about it. But it really was a physical problem. And so I started taking Rennies, antacids. I was eating them all the time. They weren't working. The acid reflux was cutting through that. And that's why then I went to Specialist London Gastroenterology, which is a private clinic for stomachs, for all of that stuff. And then I saw a great gastro guy, and he was like, right, get you doing endoscopy. Did an endoscopy. He's like, right, you've got esophagitis, you have to take PPI for a month, and then see how that responds. Took the PPI, it went away, and then I ended up staying on it for 7 years, because whenever I came off it, I just would get it, because I was still going out and living life and drinking. So I never wanted to limit my life, like a lot of these things I spoke about. Like I remember buying Kaufman's book on diet and neutralizing acid, and I was reading all these forums, and people were like, yeah, I've cut out everything, I've become vegan, I've become and all these things to neutralize acid. And I thought, I just can't be fucked to do that, because I want to live my life. And I had this attitude all the way along with anxiety and everything. Was always that attitude where I'm not. It was an important attitude in terms of recovery, but it was also a problem in attitude for not best for health, because at the time I did care when I was saying this. I was like, well, I don't care. Do you know what? Even if I bloody die, I want to live my life how I want to live it, right? Which meant that's why I'd had the problems in my stomach, because I was eating food and fizzy drinks and all this stuff, because I didn't want to make any changes. So I made some changes, but then I was sort of rational about it in the way which was good, but not initially, where I was like, I want to live my life on my terms. I don't need to live to 100, but I don't want to give up everything. I still want to have English breakfast. I still want to have a hamburger. I still want to go out and drink. I still want to be able to do all these things, and I want to live life like that. And I don't want to constrict it all and do that. And that was the attitude I took. And then with that attitude, I went on about my life and did everything. And it was good, because I wasn't scared now of death like I was with health OCD. I was like, you know what, fuck it. I've been in hospital. I've had problems. I've been in hospital, in and out of hospital with different things over the years related to anxiety, other problems that had become problems. I remember when I was about 19, I had one of the first panic attacks. And I ended up in hospital, but taken drugs at the time, which then made me scared of having a bad reaction and dying. So I ended up in hospital, and then I decided, right, no more drugs, no more. I'd taken drugs for my sport at the time, which was I was training in doing bodybuilding, weightlifting. So I'd taken steroids for not even that long time, a very short time. But then I'd had a very bad not a bad reaction. I had like maybe let's say a slight reaction to the drug, but then my first panic attack, and then I became very scared. So I said, right, no drugs at all, right? And I never touched any drugs ever after that day, recreational or anything. I'd taken recreational drugs from time to time in the past, but when I got to this point, I was like, right, never ever gonna do any drugs again. And but really, what was happening there was I was having the first panic attack, and that's where it was. And I didn't know what was going on. I thought like, then I had other problems. I had a series of stomach problems that got very bad. Where I was eating a lot to do the weight training, and I was eating a ridiculous sort of 6-7 meals a day because I was pretty obsessive in what I was doing there with the weight training. And then I remember I was walking through, I was in an airport in Spain, and I was going through the metal detector, and I vomited right before that because my stomach had very bad gastritis. And that's not a place you want to be sick. If you're sick right there, they're going to think you've got drugs in your stomach. So that's not a good place. But luckily, that didn't happen. And I ended up then just going home on the plane, seeing a doctor, had gastritis. It's pretty bad. Went on a diet, very sort of healthy diet for a month or whatever. It resolved all itself. But all my anxiety used to sort of center around the stomach for a lot of time. So I was having problems. So that was causing a lot of problems there. But then I had other problems, skin problems, eczema that flared up very bad with anxiety. Then I had sort of a staph infection in the skin, which became infected. I had one where I couldn't even walk, where I was pretty concerned about with that one. I had, what other things did I have? Loads of ulcers caused by the GERD that was bad. Very, very painful, but that was never really got serious. Very bad injury from the gym when I was lifting weights, and then I damaged a disc in my neck, and because of all the tightness of the muscles from anxiety. And then those things got worse. They sort of bring you down. You think, fucking hell, how bad. And now I've got a bulging disc, and I've got this problem in my stomach, and I've still got anxiety. All these combination of things that bring you down a lot. Physical symptoms. They're very tight. It's very hard to explain the extent of what physical symptoms are like until you experience them. Like, people come into me that don't want to live anymore just over insomnia, right? Not just over insomnia. That's how much it can take to the line. Because just think of when you're so tired, how stressed you can be. And then you've got anxiety as well. People, and they think they're never going to get over it. People get a very bad way. I know what I felt like when I had bad insomnia. So with physical symptoms, it's very, very much the same thing. Some of these things, they seem light, but like LPR, when it's bad, it's really annoying, like really frustrating. I mean, you can barely walk up a flight of stairs because it completely it traps how your lungs are working. You can shorten your breath where it feels like an asthma symptom. So you can't run or work out properly because of it. What other things that are so difficult? All those ones relating to stomach are particularly frustrating. When I was on that diet where I was basically like eating soup to get my stomach back, that was bloody horrendous because I was going on dates at the time, and then with OCD and anxiety, you're always trying to say, oh, it's just OCD and anxiety, move on with your life. And they were like, why are you not eating? Why are you not enjoying stuff? And I thought, my whole life's been restricted. And I got angry at times like that. I got really angry at times like that. I wanted to just live my life. I didn't want to have anything to do with this anymore. With OCD and anxiety, when I was younger, I was never really accepting of it initially, and I viewed it as a weakness. I viewed it as something I just didn't want, a curse kind of thing in life. I just didn't want anything to do with it. And for a long time, I used to go to the gym loads to sort of escape it and to sort of fight it, which was a disastrous thing. And I only learned that when I was reading an Ellis book, and it was saying, you're trying to control and you're trying to lock it down, and it's so irrational. And it's like, now I just work out for fun, for me, just to feel good. But then I was like, no, I need to be stronger. I don't want anything to beat me, and OCD and all is attacking me. And look, the thing with OCD, it's like one of those things. If I could inject OCD into anyone's brain, no matter how tough they think they are, or whatever, you know, it's a pretty hard thing when you first get it and you really don't understand it or anything. You know, I've faced some difficult life circumstances in my life, and OCD is definitely one of the hardest battles I ever fought. And you know, if it can bring down the likes of Howard Hughes, who was one of the wealthiest men in the world, aviation pioneer, nearly basically brought him to his death because he was so caught up in compulsions he barely even functioned, did anything, or there was no treatment at the time. You're talking a very long time ago. You know, it's obviously a difficult disorder when you don't have any help. But then when you do have help and go through the steps, it becomes much easier. But I'm saying it's when you don't. You imagine having OCD 200 years ago, bloody difficult situation. So yeah, those kind of things was difficult. All the insomnia stuff, like when you're really unrefreshed sleep, you know, you're just sort of groggy, your eyes hurt, everything hurts, body aches, a bit like fibromyalgia. It's not great. You can still do everything, but it's not ideal. And then all these things, when they persist and last longer, like every new physical symptom I used to get, I used to think, fuck, that's me, got this now for life. Because they used to sort of, one started, it didn't go away kind of thing. And so, yeah, muscle tightness. It doesn't sound like much, but when all your muscles in your back are all so constricted and tight, it makes life quite difficult because you feel like you just want to lie down all the time. When I did the disc injury, that disc injury was so bad, I used to get out of bed every day by holding all my hair, right? So I used to grab all my hair like that, and I used to lift my head off the pillow like that each day, because you don't realize how much your head weighs until you do a neck injury. And then you realise it weighs a lot. And so I used to do that, and I could barely even sit. I couldn't go to anywhere that involved sitting for a long time. I was having physio 3 times a week. It was a terrible injury. And then with swimming, rehab, all the way back. But it took a long time. Now I have no problems unless I do like deadlifts or squats, which I can't really do because of the disc injury. But otherwise, I can't notice it in life. And I'm not interested in squatting heavy or anything these days. I do the exercise for feeling good. So those things were difficult. And looking back, you know, it's like when I started this journey, 16, 17 years old with OCD, I was just a young guy in his bedroom reading a book on how to get better, or not then, because I didn't even have any resources to get better at that point. But I was saying, you know, it's lonely. You don't even know what's happened. You kind of don't understand because you can't see what's going on in your brain on a molecular, very microscopic level. So it was a very, very difficult situation. And for a long time, you know, my life was living with very, very hard physical symptoms all the time. Crushing sort of fatigue where you just wanted to lie on your back all the time. What other things? It's difficult to remember now because they all moved around so much. But it's just when they change as well, because when something changes and brings around quite a sudden symptom, you're then quite concerned because you think, God, what's happened to my body? It's breaking down, like everything keeps changing. So that's sort of very frustrating in of itself. When you're dealing with OCD and then you've got this and then, oh no, that's just OCD, but then it has become a problem. Like some things were a problem for me because I sort of, like I said with the stomach, I treated it as OCD. I was like, oh, it's just OCD, but it was actually a problem. So you have to weigh these things up. Not compulsively, obviously, but it's difficult. And so, yeah, those things, those problems. What other problems did I have? A jaw problem, TMJ, where the jaw felt like it sort of just popped out almost, so every bite was clunking. But that went back reasonably quickly, so it didn't last for so long. Jaw pain, wake up in the morning, jaw pain. Yeah, but I think it's the main symptoms were just the really non-restorative sleep from insomnia, especially with the GAD that I later developed. That was difficult. All the stomach problems. What other problems? Other things, just getting up in the night and going to the bathroom lots because of anxiety triggering that symptom. That's frustrating in itself, especially when you've got a partner and stuff like that, and then you're having to do that, and then you're waking up sweating, and you think, what the fuck's wrong with me? Why is my body doing this to me? I'm not even that worried, and it's still doing that. That's very frustrating for people. I was never on meds, but a lot of people on meds say like, oh yeah, you know, I feel a lot better, but I still get all these night sweats. Those are side effects that, you know, people, they are frustrating. They're very tiring when because you compare yourself, don't you, to the person who's lying next to you in bed. You think, well, they're just going to bed now and just get up in the morning, normal life like we had in the past. So you're always seeing that. And so sometimes I used to get very annoyed when there was something that came up that made me very aware of how ill I was. So just a particular thing like that, like just seeing other people wake up and saying to me in the morning, how do you feel? I've had such a great night's sleep, and me thinking like sleep was like a war to me. Do you know what I mean? It was like that. Or people saying, oh, do you have a nice dreams? It's like, I haven't had nice dreams for like 8 years. So it was like that. And then I just couldn't believe it as well. At the same time, I was just thinking, like, how has this all happened? Like, I'm a normal guy. Like, I haven't got any, I'm not that worried a lot of the time. And then all these things came back. But then when OCD was on, it was chronic guilt, chronic anxiety locked. I couldn't turn it off all day, every holiday, all the time. As well as when you're distracted, and it's not so bad, but at times. But that's what the journey when you're stuck is like. I know that all too well. And it's physical symptoms, they get overlooked, because if OCD was called, anxiety was called the terror disorder, it'd be taken a lot more seriously, but it gets brushed off, doesn't it? You go to the doctor, you say, I've got this, and they say, oh, it's just anxiety, and then friends and family, oh, it's just anxiety. Yeah, but it fucking feels shit. So, that's the reality of it. Even when someone's saying it's just anxiety, that doesn't take away from what you're feeling at the time, I had a woman come in about 4 months ago. She said to me, I've got cancer and I've got OCD. And I said, okay. And, a lot of people come in like that. But I said, it's a very sad situation. She was young. And I said, so you've come in here for help with OCD? And she said, yeah, because, this is really bothering me more so at the moment than the cancer. I mean, that's perspective for you. People don't realize that with OCD. People, when somebody is stuck and feeling that, it can feel really bad at the time. But obviously, when you learn to wear it as an uncomfortable coat, you work through the journey, acceptance and so on, it gets less and less and less, and then it's not so much of an issue like it once was. Like I could have 30, 40%, 50% anxiety now. Wouldn't bother me even when I had 80% anxiety. You still do everything once I changed my perspective. The perspective was key. But when you don't understand all those things and you're in it, it's very difficult. And you think to yourself, will this ever end? How disabling this feels, and nobody knows. That's the thing. If you've got a disorder, even if you've got a neurological disorder like Parkinson's, you've been diagnosed with Parkinson's, people can see you shaking. It's a little bit different. With OCD, they can't see anything. So, and plus, because of OCD, it's a bit like the boy who cried wolf, because you've sort of, at the early stages of OCD, been like, what about this? What about that? With reassurance, they've seen that. Then once that's gone on, they sort of think, oh, he's just worried. What people don't realise is like OCD is not just worry. It's like worry on steroids. It's very strong. And so it feels very, very different. But I don't have to explain that to you guys because you know that. But I think it's important to highlight that too, because often it gets sort of downplayed, or the other problem is it gets sort of overplayed as well, where you get people that are sort of like, everything's terrible and that's a 10 and that's a 10 out of 10, that's so bad and I can't handle this. And then the people who are sort of like really putting up with it difficult, then they think, oh, it's just a whining, because there obviously are people that do say those things even when it's not that bad, because they behave like that. So it's obviously is something that's difficult. It isn't just someone whining, complaining about it, although that will happen with all disorders, depression, anxiety. You will still see those behaviors too, and understandably for a lot of the time, when it's not going to help if you're just constantly complaining all the time. You've got to sort of take responsibility for your life and move forward in the right direction. But at the same time, you are going to complain and you are going to get annoyed, because it's a difficult thing to live with during those years. And I think it's important to mention that. And I wanted to do a video because often people see me on here, and I'm quite direct about how we do things and to recover, and all the necessary things to bring OCD out of the dark and put it on the map and help people recover and so on. But it's also important to remember the struggle that people have. So I try and put myself back in that mindset of what it used to be like in the past. Really think about that and think about the difficulty. When I had contamination OCD at the beginning, and I was sort of washing and cleaning for about 4, 5, 6 hours a day with shampoo, that became a problem. It became a real problem because you can see it's a problem in and of itself. If you're washing 4, 5, 6 hours a day, it is a problem. But it was a problem because of how constricted I was, because I felt like I couldn't get out, otherwise someone was going to die, or I was going to die, or I was going to pass a disease on, and it became that vicious cycle which you're trapped in. And, even when you're stuck in these things, it's hard to think about how bad you are sometimes. Sometimes you're like, oh, it's just OCD, and we like to say to ourselves all the time, and that's how all the books are written, very reassuringly. Oh, it's just OCD, just OCD. Oh, it's just OCD. Yeah, but it's taken over a lot of your life. Like, a lot of my life was consumed by OCD. And when I recovered, I realised how much it had been consumed by OCD. And that was daunting at first, and I've done videos on that called The Lost Years, where I talk about how I overcame that and came to terms with that, realising, a lot of my time had been spent with OCD, and a lot of my experiences had been sort of just constant rumination, stuck in a cycle of feeling guilt and anxiety. But then I realised that those years empowered my life and changed my life, and there was so much meaning in those. So then I changed my perspective on it. But at first I found it quite overwhelming, because when you realize sort of how much you've been caught in OCD, and because it always feels life and death, you sort of get carried along with the cycle, and you stay stuck, and your whole focus is on being stuck, so you forget about all the life going on around you. And so then when you start recovering and that changes, you become aware of the life around you, and it becomes quite different because you've suddenly been pulled out of that cycle. So that's what it's like. And the journey's got all different sort of sections to it that are different awarenesses that you have. From and how the disorder develops as well. Sometimes at the early years, it was barely any physical anxiety. Then it was more physical. Then at the beginning, I was very scared of things that never bothered me later on, and so on. So it's all different along that journey. But I thought I'd come on here, make a video on particular subjects of OCD that I want to cover in more detail, and just sort of show that human experience of that journey, because often people see me speaking and then they forget sort of the difficulty I was in, and I like to remind people of that so they can see what I've been through and what they're going through, and how it all relates, and how they're not alone, and you know, we understand what that journey is like. And it's so misunderstood. It felt misunderstood by everyone around me, and it feels very much like that today. But yeah, so that's what I wanted to come on here today to talk about: physical symptoms and physical anxiety. And I'll be back on doing more videos on that topic, because you can never do enough on that, because there's a lot to cover. And yeah, guys, I will see you on the next YouTube video, probably tomorrow. All right, guys, take it easy. See you later.